प्रणाम बंटी जी।
नमस्कार नमस्कार सोनल। सोनल निलय कर रहे हैं आज, चैंटिंग है ना, सो यू ऑल्सो गेट अ ब्रेक। उन्होंने बहुत अच्छी डेवलप्ड इट रियली वेल।
So welcome back again. Let's pay our respects to Bhante. Naman. 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 So evening chanting Dhamma Ram se. निले आप अनम्यूट कर लीजिए।
सायंकालीन वंदना। यो सो भगवा अरहं सम्मा संबुद्धो स्वाखातो येन भगवता धम्मो सुपटिपन्नो यस्य भगवतो सावक संघो तन्मयं भगवन्तं सधम्मं ससंघं इमे हि सत्कारे हि यथार्हम् आरोपिते हि अभिपूजयाम साधुनो भन्ते भगवा शुचिरपरिनिर्भूतोऽपि पश्चिमा जनतानुकम्पमानसा इमे सकारे दुगतपणाकारभूते पटिगणातु अम्हाकन्दीगरतं हिताय सुखाय अरहं सम्मा संबुद्धो भगवा बुद्धं भगवन्तं अभिवादेमि। स्वाखातो भगवता धम्मो धम्मं नमस्सामि। सुपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो संघं नमामि। अन्धमयं बुद्धस्य भगवतो पुबभाग नमकारं करोमस्ते। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। अन्धमयं बुद्धानुसतिनयं करोमस्ते। तंखोपन भगवन्तं एवं कल्याणो चित्ति सद्दो अभुगतो इति पिसो भगवा अरहं सम्मा संबुद्धो विद्याचरण संपन्नो सुगतो लोकविदु अनुत्तरो पुरुषधम्म सारथि सत्था देव मनुष्यानं बुद्धो भगवाति अन्धमयं बुद्धाभिहितं करोमासे बुद्धवरहन्त वरतादिगुणाभियुतो शुद्धाभिज्ञान करुणा हि समागततो बोधेसियो सुजनतं कमलं वसुरो वन्दामहं तमरणं शिरसा जिनेदम् बुद्धो यो सब्बपाणिनं शरणं खेम उत्तमं पठमानुसतिष्ठानं वन्दामि तं शिरेणहम् बुद्धः साहस्मिदासो व बुद्धो मे सामिकिस्सरो बुद्धः साहं नियादेमि शरीरं जीवितं चिदम् वन्दन्तोऽहं चरिष्यामि बुद्धस्यैव सुबोधितम् नत्थि मे शरणं अन्यं बुद्धो मे शरणं वरम् एतेन सच्चवज्जेन वड्ढेयं सत्तु शासने बुद्धं मे वन्दमानेन यं पुण्यं पशुतं इध सर्वेऽपि अन्तरायामि माहेशं तस्य तेजसा कायेन वाचाय वचितसा वा बुद्धेकुकमं पकतं मयाय बुद्धो पडिगृह्णातु वचयन्तं कालान्तरे संवरितं वबुद्धे अन्धमयं धम्मानुसतिनयं करोमासे स्वाख्यातो भगवता धम्मो सन्दिट्ठिको अकालिको एहिपस्सिको ओपनयिको पचतं वेदितव्यो विन्युहीति अन्धमयं धम्माभिहितं करोमासे स्वाख्याततादिगुणयोगवशेन सेयो यो मग्पाकपरियत्ति विमोखभेदो धम्मोऽकुलोकपतना तद्धारि धारी वन्दामहं तमहरं वरधम्ममेतं धम्मो यो सब्बपाणिनं शरणं खेममुत्तमं द्वितीयानुसतिष्ठानं वन्दामि तं शिरेणहम् धम्मस्साहस्मिदासो व धम्मो मे सामिकिस्सरो धम्मस्साहं नियादेमि शरीरं जीवितं चिदम् वन्दन्तोऽहं चरिष्यामि धम्मस्यैव सुधम्मतम् नत्थि मे शरणं अन्यं धम्मो मे शरणं वरम् एतेन सच्चवज्जेन वड्ढेयं सत्तु शासने धम्मं मे वन्दमानेन यं पुण्यं पशुतं इध सबेपि अन्तरायामे माहेशं तस्य तेजसा कायेन वाचाय वचेतसा वा धम्मे कुकमं पकतं मयायं धम्मो पटिगृह्णातु अचयन्तं कालान्तरे संवरितं वधम्मे अन्धमयं सङ्घानुसतिनयं करोमसे सुपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो उजुपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो न्यायपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो सामीचिपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो यदिदं चत्तारि पुरुषयुगानि अट्ठपुरुषपुग्गला एष भगवतो सावक संघो आहुनेयो पाहुनेयो दक्षिणेयो अंजलिकरणीयो अनुत्तरं पुण्यखेतं लोकसाति अन्धमयं सङ्घाभिहितं करोमसे सधम्मजो सुपटिपति गुणादियुतो योऽर्थविद्धो अर्य पुग्गल संघ सेठो शीलाधिधम्म पवरा सयकाय चित्तो वन्दामहं तमर्यान् गणं सुशुद्धं संघो यो सबपाणिनं शरणं क्षेममुत्तमं ततीयानुसतिष्ठानं वन्दामि तं शिरेणहम् संघस्साहस्मिदासो व संघो मे सामिकिस्सरो संघस्साहं नियादेमि शरीरं जीवितं चिदं वन्दन्तोऽहं चरिष्यामि संघस्सोपटिपन्यतम् नत्थि मे शरणं अन्यं संघो मे शरणं वरम् एतेन सच्चवज्जेन वढ्ढेयं सत्तु शासने संघं मे वन्दमानेन यं पुण्यं पशुतं इध सबेपि अन्तरायामे माहेशं तस्य तेजसा कायेन वाचाय वचेतसा वा संघे कुकमं पकतं मयायं संघो पटिगृह्णातु अचयन्तं कालान्तरे संवरितं वा संघे
Sir, now please, if we can play the talk. Yeah.
देख पा रहे हैं ना?
हाँ सर.
आवाज का देख लेना, अगर नहीं आ रही है तो बता देना.
जी.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So I'd like to ask permission from the Venerable Mahatheras and the Sangha. I express my greetings to all the lay people here today. One of Ajahn Chah's constant reminders was that the most valuable thing we can do is, with our whole lives, in fact, is to make our minds peaceful. So we've all come from different places, perhaps, and had some activity in the last hour or so. So perhaps we can just start by sitting quietly, compose our minds, to hear Dhamma, to reflect on Dhamma, and prepare to bring that Dhamma into our lives. Just for a few minutes, very short time, just to establish ourselves here, just some quiet breathing. So today is a day of remembering an individual person, but perhaps more importantly, a life well lived and teachings given and a practice undertaken and taken to its fullness, its fruition. The important thing for all of us, students of the Dhamma from whatever tradition, lay or monastic, is of course to reflect on how we can bring these teachings, the life of an individual, into our own lives in a way where it becomes a modern day reality. This morning we heard from somebody who was fortunate, Ajahn Sumedho, very lucky to have spent many years living with Ajahn Chah. This evening there will be other speakers who lived with him directly. I've been asked to speak today as a monk ordained in the tradition out of faith in Buddha Dhamma, but also having contacted Ajahn Chah to a certain degree. But I can't say that he was my direct teacher in the same way. I never got the chance to sit at his feet and hear the stories, hear the jokes, or get the hard teachings, be admonished. When he was fierce, he was very fierce. When he was warm, he was very warm. So I never got that directly. But I was fortunate enough to pay my respects to him while he was still alive. But by that time, he was already very sick. He'd had a serious medical condition for many years, was unable to speak, was virtually paralyzed. Yet, that meeting with him and that chance to be around him just for a short time, but more importantly, to come into close contact with the tradition that was already growing up around him and was being slowly established and was already thriving, actually, was enough to feel this was an individual who I could really give my life to. And in fact, there was no other thing that seemed logical to do. So perhaps as a Dhamma sharing today, just to share some of that with everybody. In May of 1989, I had taken a temporary Samanera ordination in Thailand, partly as an interesting experience. I was 18 years old, partly as an offering to my family, my Thai family, but not really knowing anything about Buddhism, Buddhist practice, meditation, or the tradition. At the time, I could not speak Thai, and so by good fortune, my Upajjhaya, my preceptor, sent me to Wat Bananachad, which Ajahn Sumedho spoke about this morning, the monastery for Westerners, where the language of instruction given was in English. And so that was the real first encounter, you could say, with Ajahn Chah, simply arriving in a monastery of his tradition. One already felt his presence. And in many ways, it wasn't easy. It wasn't a welcome presence, because simply put, it was physically very demanding. Rising very early, 3 a.m., long bindabata, morning chanting, meditation, difficult conditions, and monks practicing seemed very strictly, very little talking going on. And myself not knowing anything about the tradition, unable to meditate, lonely, and wondering what it was really all about. It all seemed very austere. And some of the chants we would do in morning and evening chanting also I found very jarring. On the boards outside in the exhibition, you see the words Jara Damomi Jaranganatito. So we used to chant this Jara Damomi Jaranganatito. I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. It seemed very somber, negative, and depressing. Vayadi Damomi Vayadi Ganatito. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. Marana Damomi Marana Ganatito. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond death. I couldn't really understand why we needed to start the day in this particular way. Surely there could be something a bit more uplifting. And then we would move on to contemplating the body. We chant there's 32 parts, many of you familiar with, going through hair of the head, hair of the nails, teeth, skin, and then internal organs as well, heart, lungs, onto intestines, and the other more unattractive and usually less desirable parts of the body. And again, I couldn't quite understand why we were focusing on the fact that, as the chant goes, this body is a sealed bag of skin filled with unattractive things. I thought, this Ajahn Chah must be very strange to teach his disciples to chant this. I didn't realize that actually these words went back to the original Buddha. I had such little understanding. So I was learning day by day, and it wasn't easy. And I wasn't really sure if I would be able to hang in there for more than a week or two. But one thing there was to look forward to would be, I was told we would go and pay respects to Ajahn Chah, the great master himself, in a few days' time. It was the tradition that on the lunar observance day, the Sangha would all get into pickup trucks and drive over a few kilometers to Wat Nong Bapong, his monastery, and pay respects to Ajahn Chah. And I was told then I would get a chance to finally see Ajahn Chah. And I was very happy about that. So I heard so much about him, seen so many lovely pictures. He seemed this being full of smiling metta and the wisdom. Everybody seemed so inspired. I thought this will really help me. But that meeting was, again, very, very difficult. It was almost disturbing. We would drive to the monastery and then park and then go to his kuti, the hut where he was being looked after. I'd been told that he doesn't teach very much anymore because he's sick. But I wasn't expecting the sight of Ajahn Chah, very frail, looking tiny compared to this larger-than-life figure in the pictures, without his false teeth, his whole face sunken in, and being wheeled out by two attendant monks, both wearing masks covering their mouth for hygiene. It just seemed like a very grim picture. What a traumatic scene. So again, those of you that have seen the exhibition or afterwards, there are pictures of that period of his life in a wheelchair, paralyzed, unable to speak, even with a bandage, a plaster over his throat, covering the tracheotomy tube where he was fed. So this is a very powerful image. I'd been brought up in London, and in the West, as many of you know, suffering of that kind, old age, sickness, is not really brought out into the public sphere. And certainly young people don't make a special effort to go and pay respects to people who are old and sick, and then make that a big part of their week and sit contemplating somebody who's old and sick. And we did the chanting, and then there was a period of silent meditation, and the attendant monks were fanning away the mosquitoes. And then we paid respects, bowed, and they wheeled Ajahn Chah back into his hospital kuti. And there was this sense of deep, deep disappointment. Because the thought arose in me, well, I won't be able to learn anything from the master if he's in this state. And then another thought, another nagging doubt about Buddhism arose, because I'd been learning about the law of karma, that good actions bring good results. And I thought, well, what if this is the enlightened master who surely did so much good action in his life? If this is what it comes to, then what chance is there for someone like me? So I was thinking about this Buddhism. It didn't seem to offer much of a solution. So as we were putting our robes on and getting back into the pickup trucks, I commented to one of the monks. I said, "Oh, isn't it a pity that Ajahn Chah has to suffer so much?" And he knew I was new to this Dhamma. So he sort of smiled and said to me, "Why do you think he's suffering?" And then it was time to get in the pickup trucks. But that answer was very, very powerful. Actually, with hindsight, it's very powerful, because it wasn't a refutation. It wasn't necessarily saying, no, he's not suffering, he's enlightened. He was simply asking me to reflect on my own bias, my own preconception, that somebody physically sick, aging, unable to move, unable to speak, with a hole in their throat to be fed, with needing monks attending you 24 hours a day, that person would necessarily be suffering. That was my assumption, and that the Dhamma hadn't seemed to work for them. So luckily there was something in me that said, yes, why do I assume that he's suffering? That night was the observance night, and this is the practice in Ajahn Chah monasteries. We sat up all night, or tried to. Very difficult thing to do, meditate all night. Most people don't quite make it. And in the morning, 3:30, we began the chanting again. Jara namo mi jaranganati do. I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. Bayati namo mi bayati nganati do. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. Marana namo mi marananganati do. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. Sabbe piyehi. You know the rest. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. And suddenly there was the feeling, the deep realization that rather than being a negative statement or a negative way of looking at things, that finally here was truth. This was the undeniable truth. And Luang Por Chah, in his state, which I'd taken to be so miserable, so negative, was a living testament to that truth. And I realized something that struck me late in that evening was that no one else seemed to mind Luang Por Chah being in that state. All his disciples, the lay people, the monks, it wasn't as if there was a problem. I'm sure obviously they wouldn't have chosen their teacher to become sick. But because all his life he'd been preparing them for that, preparing for that nature. Dhamma, entire Dhamma chart means nature, the birth of Dhamma. So the natural process to take place. When it finally happened to him, it was simply the next phase of his teaching, absolutely in line with the way he had been living his life and the way he'd been teaching. So luckily, as is so often the case in our lives, we have a moment, you could call it a little moment of insight or a shift takes place. And suddenly, I became very keen to really study this truth. And thinking back at my life as a layperson, as a teenager, back in England and then coming to Malaysia and Thailand on my family holidays, seeking pleasure, enjoying things, very nice, nothing too blameworthy about that, but realizing that essentially there was a deception going on. There was the constant message was, of course, that the external world, the material world, the sensual world is where we will find our happiness. And when the material world, the sensual world goes wrong, then we'll suffer. Ajahn Chah's message through his life and through his presence to me was no thing, no person, no event, no situation has the power to make you suffer, or even should be seen as negative, should be judged in any way. We're actually free to make our own decision. So this is how, say, towards the end of his life, for 10 years, I believe, from the early 80s to the early 90s, he didn't say a word. He simply lay in Wat Nong Papong, and people were able to go and pay respects and take away whatever they were able to from the situation. And in time, Dharma was translated into English, tapes, and later CDs. And so these teachings lived on. Now, Ajahn Chah's strength, as I understand it and really experienced it, and his real wisdom was emphasizing Sangha. Sangha means the monastic Sangha, but it means community harmony. But of course, as a monk, particularly his close focus of teaching, especially in the early years, had been on the monks who came to stay with him, because he was very unknown for many years. And there were key teachings that he brought into his monastic training, some of the things we'll hear about later on, his Vinaya instructions. But essentially, there were some key themes to Ajahn Chah's life, which the monastic Sangha inherited, tried their best to integrate into their own lives. And I feel it's very valuable to share to this day, because they're valid as timeless teachings. That his teachings come all the way from the Buddha's time, yet he was able to make them, bring them to life in the present moment, and then transmit them. So as I said at the beginning, it was tough in his monasteries. Khanti means patient endurance. It's a barami, it's spiritual quality. And partly in those days, Northeast Thailand was much poorer. There's been huge material development in the last 20 years. But it was also tough because Lupo Chah made it tough. The tradition is what we call the Dutonga tradition. So all the things like eating in one's alms bowl, going on alms round, and being frugal, and getting up early together as a Sangha, coming together and chanting these words together, supporting each other in our practice, and reflecting on Dhamma and meditating together through the wee hours of the dawn, and in the evening as well, sometimes late into the night. So this tough foundation, Khanti, patient endurance, was what gave the men and women living there the strength to put up with the difficulties. Now, the obstacles in life begin with the physical ones, difficulties from heat, cold, hunger, etc., and perhaps sharp words. But then also, as Luang Por Chah taught, the real patient endurance, the real need to bear with our own moods, our mental states, not to react and respond to the swings of delight and aversion, wanting and not wanting, liking, disliking, judging as good and bad, having a mind which is able to stay even and balanced, using a certain amount of patient endurance. And Ajahn Chah said himself, this takes a certain daring. I heard he was asked, well, what makes you special, Luang Por? What do you have that other monks don't have? He said, nothing really, but I dared. And this comes out when you listen to the monks who lived with him. He would say, patiently endure with patience. Dare to be patient, dare to endure. Because it takes a kind of courage. And so he managed to weave that into his monastic framework with activities right throughout the day, which were challenging, often physically difficult conditions, training you to go against the stream. You heard this morning Ajahn Sumedho saying he came back to Wat Papong to offer his life to Ajahn Chah, and Ajahn Chah sent him off to establish Wat Panana Chah, which was the last thing he wanted to do, but to challenge us. And that's what we need in order to stand up to, or in order to really investigate and understand on a deeper level what was also at the heart of Ajahn Chah's teaching. Most of you don't speak Thai, but if you do learn any words of Thai, I would suggest the 2 words you should learn are mai ne. These 2 words mean not sure. And this was his own slightly loose and liberal translation of the common Buddhist teaching, sanya anicca. Perception is impermanent, or just anicca in general. Sabbe sankhara anicca, all conditions are impermanent, all conditioned phenomena are impermanent. That's a very formal and lofty way of putting it. He would say, nothing is certain. Nothing is stable. And this is a very direct teaching, one which we don't really have to have much experience with scriptures or much of a deep spiritual foundation to be able to take on and apply to our lives. We ask ourselves, yeah, actually, what is certain? And this response of the monk, when I asked him, if this is Ajahn Chah, if this is what happens to him, what hope is there for us? And he said, well, why do you assume he's suffering? And the answer is, yeah, it's true. It's not certain, is it? And straight away, we're able to let go. So this idea of uncertainty was something which, for someone like myself, coming in cold, with no background in meditation, even with no interest, this wasn't something I planned on doing for the rest of my life, just like Ajahn Sumedho. He was thinking of 2 years, I was thinking of 2 weeks. But it's like something reels you in, something inside you saying, there's much more here than meets the eye. There's much more investigation to do. And if this is truth, you can't turn your back on it. If that's really what you feel, that life, as you understand it, really is uncertain, that where you're putting your certainty may well one day let you down, then it's almost like an obligation or responsibility to seek something more solid, just as if we were building a house. We would need solid foundations. And Chah himself would say again and again, we have to start with the foundation work. He would often talk about this when talking about sila, this being the foundations for our lives. So the ability to begin to see that all things were not sure. And this was something which would be a common theme in the Dhamma talks I began to read and began to listen to. So we start with seeing, yes, the body is uncertain, it's not sure. We see that people get old and sick, and although we know it's going to happen to all of us, we don't know when. In the sala, the hall, the meditation hall, the Wat Panana Chah, and many monasteries, there was a skeleton hanging up in a glass cabinet, which again, the first day I arrived, I looked at this skeleton and I really wondered what kind of a place I'd somehow landed in. But the van that dropped me off had already gone and I didn't have any money, so I was stuck, at least for the moment, and that was before the mobile phones. I couldn't call home and say, get me out of here. So So I was looking at this skeleton, and then at the bottom of the glass cabinet, in another smaller jar, was a very, very young baby, which had died in infancy, in a preserved jar. And that looked so horrible. But the teaching of that was more powerful than just that we're all going to get old and sick and die. It's really that actually it can happen anytime, even right at the beginning of life, when we would all say that shouldn't happen. It can. So we're beginning to contemplate and seeing how impermanence is much more a part of life than we would ever imagine. And so not only on the material realm, the physical realm, our own bodies, but then of course our thoughts. And more interestingly, this was what really intrigued me. And I think with a Western upbringing and education, many of you share kind of rigorous education. We hold very much to our perceptions and our views. We're actually trained to cultivate views and then hold on to them like mad. And it's very challenging to let go of them, and something that's very destabling. So one night I was listening to a talk in the hall to the senior monk, an English monk, many of you know, Ajahn was giving a talk. And he began to talk about how our perceptions are impermanent, and began to talk about our views and opinions. And he just mentioned things like political views around the environment, or views around social issues. And he just simply asked the question again, can you really be sure about any of your views? Are any of them really absolutely sure? I mean, can you actually say that? It's not saying they're all wrong. You don't have to suddenly go into a sense that you don't know anything, but asking the question, can we really be sure that we're right? And again, simply that gives a little opening where we're able to see the truth, simply that we might be right, but we might be wrong. And just that opening to know that there was something to consider, I actually found almost like a huge burden was lifted off my heart. Because age 18, as you know, there's so much pressure to know, what are you going to do? What would you like to be? What are your social attitudes and values? Are you politically correct? What kind of orientations do you have in all kinds of areas? You have to know. And this is kind of constant challenge in group situations. Will you say the right thing and be accepted, or be convincing, or be successful, or just be right? And to be able to say, actually, it's okay not to know, to hear the teacher encouraging that was not refreshing. It was, like I said, like a huge weight lifted. And again, another sense that this is truth. In the same way that we're going to get old and sick and die, it's truth. I realize nothing is sure. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is stable. Even if things are permanent for a little, we can have a sense of a short-term permanency, but it's very unstable. And so what a sort of a very different way to investigate things. And so this is the kind of the gradual teaching, you could say, of Ajahn Chah, the particular dhammas that he picked up from. Not his own dhamma, this is the timeless teachings that the Buddha himself had taught. And those weren't his either, as he said again and again. This is akaliko. But Ajahn Chah's skill was to find a few current themes and weave them together. So from mai ne, not sure or unstable, we come to, well then, what are we holding on to? So first we see that the holding on to our thoughts, our views, opinions, that's actually very difficult. It's like again, one of Luang Por Chah's similes was like carrying bags. You carry these bags around, and it's so heavy, and it feels so heavy. And somebody says, "Well, put down the bags," and you say, "Well, then I won't have my bags." And in a minute, you can still have them. Just put them down. You don't have to carry them all the time, and use them skillfully. And so, just to be able to put down that knowing was so uplifting and enlightening for the heart, in the sense it made the heart feel light and less burdened rather than more burdened. So that this theme, this is a theme which I'm sure you'll hear more of today, of letting go. Chah taught us just to let go through seeing just how unsure all of these things were. So in a sense, this is a few very, very kind of snippets of his teachings, but just to share with you how somebody who's now long passed away, but even at that time wasn't teaching, how he was able to inspire people, not just myself, but many, many others, simply to dedicate their whole lives to the path. There's certainly a leap of faith, because even then and now, no one can prove Ajahn Chah's enlightenment or any of the enlightened ones. We don't have this direct knowledge. But we look and we see, how does somebody live their life? And what are the ways what are the constant words they use? And then particularly in times of adversity, when things become difficult, when the body is breaking down, when everything's going wrong, how do they react? And when somebody reacts with a smile or with the equanimity or with the metta or with the sense of never mind, just let go, then we get a sense, it's a little inkling that this person has something, some kind of wisdom that we'd like to have as well. And so that was the experience. And as I said at the beginning, his sense of creating Sangha was so beautiful. And what struck me most was the true reverence, not just reverence, but deep love. The only word really is love, that his direct disciples and the lay people of Ubon had for him. In Thai we have the expression, Paw Me Kruba Ajahn. Paw Me means mother, father, and Kruba Ajahn means monk, teacher, like our Ajahn, Acharya or Sayadaw. So he was referred to as Paw Me Kruba Ajahn, mother, father, teacher, mother, father, Ajahn, not just Ajahn Chah. To people who lived with him and studied under him, he was mother, father, Ajahn Chah. So sometimes his name is translated as Luang Po, which means venerable father. But in Thai, they acknowledge that side of him, which was the mother too. He seemed to have cared for the Sangha, nurtured them through their early monastic years, not only giving birth to them as monks by ordaining them, but then nurturing them through their early years, leading by example, being there himself. 3 a.m, they used to say that sometimes you couldn't ring the bell because he would ring it first. And then when you got to the sala one day thinking you were going to get there first, you were second because he was there already. So leading by example, leading with metta, leading with love, but also, from what I've heard, being very fierce when it was time to be fierce. Because sometimes we do need a shock, like children, you have to scold them. I don't know, I'm not a parent. But from what I'm told, you do have to scold your children. They need their boundaries, they need their strict, clear guidelines, whether it's vinaya, whether it's admonishment. And he was there to do that, but in a way where everybody trusted that his intentions were entirely pure, that he had nothing but good wishes for people at all times. It wasn't that there were times when he wished everybody well, but then there were also times when he got angry with you and actually somehow experienced negativity. The outward expression of fierceness was simply knowing what we needed to learn. His disciples sometimes needed a sharp rebuke, and actually in Thai culture that was quite acceptable. With the Westerners, with their different conditioning and sense of fear and a deep, often inability to take strong words, he was very, very gentle. He was the warm and loving grandfather. And that was also the later years of his life. So he was this very skilled master in learning how to pass over the Dhamma that he had experienced, that sense of being a parent to the Sangha, and not just the Sangha. His kuti was like an open house. Ajahn Sumedho was telling me recently, even after evening chanting, 9 p.m, 10 p.m, sometimes villagers would come, they have a problem, and they would go and see him. He would receive them under his kuti with warmth, and they would tell them about his problem. And often it wasn't so much what he would give them, but simply the fact that he was there to listen to them and had time for them. So this sense of growing the Sangha. So every year now, in Thailand, there's an annual week-long meditation Dhamma practice festival and Dhamma talks. It's a bit like today's event, but it lasts 1 week. And there's 5,000 lay people and 2,000 monks camping in mosquito nets and tents and sleeping on mats in the forest of his monastery, around his jedi, waking up early, listening to Dhamma all day, practicing meditation, and recollecting and reflecting on the teacher. And what comes up again and again and again is that when we do this, when we come to practice in this way, it doesn't matter whether Ajahn Chah is long gone or the Buddha himself is 2,500 years ago gone before us. It doesn't really matter. We can all be disciples of the Buddha. We can all be disciples of Ajahn Chah or any enlightened teacher. If we take those teachings and put them into practice. So in the same way, the Buddha had his very famous teaching to a monk when he told him, one who sees the Dhamma sees me. Yo dhammam passati, so mang passati. The one who sees the Dhamma sees me. One who sees me sees the Dhamma. And in Thailand, this is what's the constant refrain during this Ajahn Chah practice week is if we practice the Dhamma in the way our teachers did, then it's as if we see them. It wasn't that those disciples who were lucky enough to be there 30, 40 years ago and to be sitting in the same meditation hall with the master somehow got some magical some magical inspiration or transmission from him. It's up to us right now to take these teachings. Now there's so much books and Dhamma talks and information available. But do we dare to put it into practice in our daily life? Do we dare to challenge ourselves and say, actually, that perception I have is not sure? Can we stop ourselves when we're getting into an argument and say, hang on, I won't let my mind move towards negativity. I'll stay with metta, tolerance, understanding. And this is how to be an Ajahn Chah disciple in this modern life. And so for myself and many of the monks here, and all the monks ordaining in this tradition today, we can't say we had Ajahn Chah as our teacher, but we can say those teachings are with us today, and we dedicate our life to the teacher in the same way that all of us here, I'm sure, are dedicating our lives at least to Buddha Dhamma Sangha. It's not really about an individual person, and today isn't about some kind of guru devotion to a particular individual, but about discussing, listening to, sharing, and celebrating timeless truths, and hopefully taking away some of it, part of it, reflecting on it, and then bringing it into our lives for our own well-being, for the benefit, for the happiness of us all. So on this occasion, it's a very great privilege to be invited to come and share these few short words. I sincerely wish that everybody here can take some inspiration from this whole event and is further encouraged and moved to share the spirit of Sangha, harmony, community life, practicing Dhamma Vinaya in line with the teachings of the Buddha, dedicating our lives to the Triple Gem. So it seems to be a very worthy thing to devote ourselves to. So I'd like to end my talk there.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
थैंक यू सर। और अब बंदे जी अजान चाह की एक टॉक में से रीडिंग करेंगे। अब तक हमने उनके डिसाइपल्स के इम्प्रेशंस को सुना, अब हम डायरेक्टली अजान चाह के वर्ड्स को सुन लेते हैं और फिर उस पर डिस्कशन।
So दीप्ति, अगर आप ठीक समझें,
जी,
I'm reconsidering doing a reading. I see के हम काफी लोग इकट्ठा हैं. There are about 20-22 of us. और जो हम अभी सुनते आ रहे हैं that Ajahn Chah is encouraging संघ, so in a sense हम लोग भी यहाँ संघ हैं. So maybe I can certainly do the reading, but maybe I just received some photographs of this today's event, so I can just share them first. और फिर यदि if people have questions or would like to say something, then maybe it's a more valuable use of the next 20 minutes. And if there isn't much that people want to say, then of course I can go ahead and read what I have. So,
Sure, Bhante, sounds
is that
good.
okay? Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, of course.
So I just got some pictures from today's event. This is my reading. I don't want to show this. Okay, दिख रही है सबको picture?
हाँ, दिख रही है.
Okay, very good. So this is from Ajahn Chah स्तूप और आप लुम्फोर लियम को सब लोग लेफ्ट पे देख सकते हैं स्क्रीन के और उनके साथ अजन अनन है. हम में से कुछ लोग शायद उनको पहचानते हैं. So this is from this afternoon. I think they did the circumambulation आज करीब 3 या 4 बजे किया था जिन्होंने दोपहर. And there is Ajahn Kampong in the center. So this is the museum जो दीप्ति हमें दिखा रही थी. ये आज की वहाँ की है picture और इसकी decoration. Okay, so this is back at the stupa. So it was a small gathering today because of the whole thing with COVID. So this is the monastic gathering. और आज सुबह जो पिंडपात हुआ उसकी कुछ pictures हैं just outside Wat Papong. These are the lay people today. इनमें से कुछ photos आपने दीप्ति के collection में भी देखी थी. So these are the same locations basically, but much smaller. Of course, this is how they decorated the museum today. Again, the same museum जो दीप्ति ने हमें दिखाया पहले. ये सुबह का पिंडपात है. आप में से शायद कुछ लोग पहचानेंगे. The monk at number 3 with the glasses is the Nepalese monk Gunakaro जो यहाँ आए थे अजन पसन्नो के साथ. So he's on Lumpur Liam's team now. He's from Wat Pananacha. So मैं इनके साथ था पिछले कुछ महीने before I came here. This is again सुबह का जो पिंडपात होता है हमारा. So this is back at the stupa. So just the monks going inside. आप अगर ध्यान से देखेंगे लेफ्ट एक्सट्रीम लेफ्ट पे अजन अचलो देखेंगे लंबे से. Sorry, I have a funny. Okay, so आज सुबह. Right. So and this is Lumpur Liam की जो कुटी है यहाँ पे धर साहब. This is where you showed him the video of the land and all that.
Ajahn Anan and Ajahn Achlo.
Ajahn Anan, Ajahn Achlo, and the monk on the left is the abbot of Ajahn Anand's branch in Australia. Very senior monk. So this is from this kuti. There's some problem that my computer is not showing the other pictures, but so that's about it. Okay, so if people have something to say, some questions, just some comments, we can do that. Spend time as Sangha. I suspect Ajahn Chah would be in favor of our spending time together as Sangha. He was always emphasizing that rather than only just listening with our ears. So if there's something, then you're welcome. Maybe somebody can start the questions off. Once one person starts it, then it gets going. So maybe if anybody would like to say anything, that might be one way to it.
Yes, Vaibhav, go ahead.
Maybe Arpan, I can. Oh, sorry. I'll share with the friends how we did the pilgrimage in Thailand after your first ordination. You remember we went. Francois took us to Lumpur Mun's places and Lumpur Sao's places, and also Maichi KVs, you remember? And then we also went to the place where chest bone relic, I don't remember the name of that place, where Buddha's chest bone relic is supposed to be kept. And it was a really wonderful, hectic, long trip, but at every place we had unique experiences. You know, Maichi KV's stupa, there is her relics there. And there's relics, there's a story about it, you know, that since she was not fully ordained nun, after her cremation, the one, I think Ajahn Lungta Mahabua came for her. He recognized her to be a arahant, so he came and did which is quite a news in the whole community. And then her relics were, of course, distributed among her disciples without much attempt to keep them safe and all that. And then after a few months, all of them reported that the relics were changing and they're becoming like gems. And the same phenomenon had been earlier noticed with Lumpur Mun's relics. His relics were also, because there was in 1941 or something, I think, if I remember. So his relics were distributed. All his disciples said, we want, and they took it away. And after a few months, they noticed that it is also changing and becoming like gems. And we saw those, one for Lumpur Mun, Lumpur Sao, and Maichi KV's relics. They look like gems, you know, shining glass crystals are actually relics. And if you meditate there at those, in the proximity of that area, it's a profound experience, you know, everywhere, wherever we went. So that was really, I mean, it's basically to create a faith, and that yes, there is something in this place which is nothing other than the relics are there. And they have such a powerful influence. I remember vividly that, you know, the kind of experience we used to get in meditation after 30 days course with intense meditation, the kind of dissolution of the body you experience, where we're running from one place to another, and we just sat in Lumpur's house, Chaitya, for about 20 minutes, and I was absolutely blown over. The whole body was totally disintegrated within that time. It was such a powerful place, you know. So much of energy was there in that. And same thing we noticed in Lumpur Sao's, in Lumpur Mun's place, to some extent in Ajahn Chah's monastery also. So there's pretty, you know, it creates a great faith that there's something in these people, that even their relics can create so much of energy around you and make you feel something for which you practiced for 30 days in an intense meditation retreat. And here in 15 minutes, you can reach those states and just be completely dissolved in the domain of anicca and nothing remaining there. So those experiences are really stuck in the memory very much, and I thought it would be good to share with everybody.
Thank you, Dharsa. Thank you. I think I may just add that we shouldn't forget that the person who's experiencing them is somebody like Dharsa. So there is also that patrata of yourself. And okay, I think Vaibhav had his hand up.
Yes, I just like Sir said that, you know, in the presence of relics itself that you get such experience. I was wondering, like, you or Sir have made, such a person who you believed to achieve, have achieved path of rotation, and what are your experiences regarding that?
So I'll actually request Dharsa to answer that, but you know, before that, एक चीज हम सबको याद रखना बहुत जरूरी है. Ajahn Chah actually never really encouraged conversations around attainments. और ये कहानी हमने स्टिलनेस फिल्म में पढ़ी है, और बहुत कहानियां हैं अजान चा, and not just Ajahn Chah, by the way, all our teachers would never ever encourage conversations around attainments. Ajahn Chah ये कहा करते थे कि उनको कई लोग आते थे पूछने कि हमने सुना है आप अरहंत हैं वगैरह वगैरह. उन्होंने कहा मैं अरहंत हूँ या ना हूँ, it has nothing to do with your getting rid of your suffering. The path is quite clear for everybody, so we should just work hard and follow the path. So generally speaking, and specifically speaking, our teachers encourage us to not get stuck with discussing whether person X is attained in this manner or not. They say that agar aap marg pe chalenge, and if you are on the right track, you will experience freedom from suffering to the extent that you walk on the path. So therefore, and so many experience that progressive freedom from suffering, not just the ultimate release, but even progressive walking. So I would only say that much, and leave it to Darsab to answer anything else that you'd like to.
Regarding this issue, I mean, regarding the people whom we meet, who have they influenced you? Of course, we have been influenced by many people, senior monks, sitting near them, talking to them, and feeling their proximity. You feel that they are really accomplished meditators. That's all that you see. Whether they are at X stage or Y stage, I have no way to say really. But you really feel good. Yeah, there's no doubt about that, of course. And there are experiences which, as Arpan mentioned, they may be personal, associated with a particular. It's not worth really mentioning them in a public forum. And I'm just reminded of a story which we read in Stillness Flowing. I think one of the foreigners, I think, asked him, what is a sotapanna? And he said, it's a fish sauce. He said something in Thai, which he couldn't understand, and the monk here translated for him, it's fish sauce. Fish sauce? What the hell is that? He says, for years, he just wondered. Everybody was saying, what is fish sauce and what is sotapanna? So this thing must have gone abroad, and then English Sangha Trust chairman came to Wat Papong, and George Shah, very sharp person, and he again asked him same question, and again got the same reply. He said, fish sauce. And then somehow he was staying in a restaurant where he saw the fish sauce bottle on which the brand was Sotapanna. So he said, yeah, it's just a name, that's it. Just a name, a label, there's nothing much in it. What is important is what is inside the label. That's what is important. So it's very powerful, a very powerful teaching which has stayed with all of us for a long time. So we don't really discuss that. We see what a person's proximity does to you, what his teachings do to you, what his behavior do to you. When we come and, for example, the senior monks who came to Dhammarama, they were there for a few days, some for 3 days, some for 5 days. So we had an opportunity to see how they live, how they respond to situations. And that gives you confidence that, yeah, there's something in them which we would also like to get. And that's what keeps us on the path. And that's what I think is most important.
कोई और questions हैं?
क्वेश्चन तो नहीं है
पुण्य जी, आप एक
I was
चीज
just saying कि But sorry. Just a minute, I just put it over.
हाँ राजेंद्र जी बोलिए.
लेकिन यही बात करनी थी कि जैसे आप अभी बता रहे थे कि ऑक्सीमिटी में रहने से पता चल जाता है कि कैसे उससे वेव्स आती हैं, कैसी वाइब्रेशंस आती हैं. एंड दैट रियली इज ट्रू. वो पर्सनली एक्सपीरियंस भी किया जा सकता है.
Yeah, so Rajendra ji, I would simply repeat what my teachers have taught me, which is that you can experience all the waves. I mean, you'd probably get many more waves in a roller coaster, you know. So waves don't really in and of themselves mean anything. The real question is कि what am I doing to walk the path? Sure, I can find somebody inspiring, and that's fine. But that's just only barely half a step. And so I think we shouldn't really get too caught up with individual experiences. They are experiences and they're conditioned, and the nature of all conditioned experience, whether it is waves or dissolution or whatever it is impermanent, transitory, and not self. And if you remember, Ajahn Chah ने कई लोगों को exactly यही कहा था जिन्होंने और monasteries में बर्मा में बहुत subtle states प्राप्त किए थे, that they are just states, and ultimately even states have to be let go of. Yeah, so I would encourage us to not allow something that sounds or even feels pleasant to be something that catches our attention when the real liberation is in wisdom.
Yeah,
that's up, please.
it's exactly, it's basically for inspiration, that the path which is being taught is having some impact, and you feel inspired when you see the behavior of the people, and that's what really matters. We all need inspiration from time to time. We reach certain plateaus and we find that probably the further progress is getting stifled. And if you meet a person who seems to be able to do what you are not able to do, and you're able to live in a manner we are not able to live, that gives you inspiration. And then you practice, then you talk to him. What exactly is the kind of practice you do? And then you see to what extent it is applicable to you. So there's a value in terms of inspiration, but as is rightly said, practice to humko hi karni hai na. They can inspire us and tell us the path they are following, and then we evaluate it, whether that path is suitable for me or not, and then practice it accordingly. The sense of it is practice, really. Inspiration is only to give us a sustainable ability to sustain on the path, because that also is extremely important. When you walk on the path and you feel a lot of difficulties, you need some confidence that, yeah, it doesn't matter, difficulties are a part of the path. So in that extent, it is helpful. What particular experience you get or not get, unless you, as I've always been saying, what matters is what you learn from the experience, not the experience itself. So when you get an experience, what do you learn from it? That's the matter. That's what is important.
एसपी जी आप कुछ पूछ रहे थे?
I just wanted a very simple query from, if Bhanteji considers appropriate. Just wanted to know what is a daily routine for a monk is like these days. Is it the same that is described, let's say, in stillness flowing, or is it somewhat different these days?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. It's
Okay.
exactly the same. Yeah, there is this tradition in our tradition in Thailand to start the day at Actually, Papong starts its day earlier. The bell goes at 2:45. In Nanachat, we started at 3. But it's exactly the same, yeah. That's one thing that's actually not changed. I think Western monasteries में कुछ अलग-अलग routines हैं, but pretty similar. I mean, 3 might become 4. That's all. But yeah, it's pretty much that way. So most of the days you're free on your own. I mean, some monasteries, of course, have a lot of work. जैसे धरसा बार-बार हमें कहते हैं. जो Thai monasteries हैं, they work a lot. They like work physically 12 hours a day. And they're not sitting around.
Typically.
Sorry?
What kind of work is that?
Oh, it's very varied. Like these are huge monasteries. They take a lot of effort to maintain. They are built entirely by monks on their own. वो जो आप buildings देख रहे हैं, those stupas are built just by monks themselves. I mean, जो Lumpur Liam का भी स्तूप बना है, that's about 3 or 4 times Ajahn Chah's स्तूप. It's all been built completely by monks. Like physically, everything. Welding, cement mixing, bricks, digging, everything. So the Thai monks, and also remember, जो Thai monks हैं, वो उनके background जो है, वो काफी they are basically rural villagers, farmers. So they're very used to work and they keep doing a lot of work. So Dincharya same hai. In Vatman Anachat, what is self time, free time is what is work time in a Thai monastery. So
thank you.
So yeah, it's very different from our imagination of monks too. Maybe at some point I'll try and pull some pictures out and show them. You'd all be super surprised to see how it is. And actually inspiring. मुझे तो frankly वो बहुत inspiring लगता है कि जो हमारी छवि है monastic life की, it's just another perception. And that was really my big learning. I've shared it with some of you, that most of what I learned there was how things are so different from how I think they are. And if I could just let go of my conception की चीजें कैसी हैं या कैसी होनी चाहिए, it's great. The resistance is dropped. So
looks like no more questions, so shall we move into some chanting in closing?
okay, I can do some. Yeah, maybe it's we can invite those of our colleagues who have prepared chantings to do something. Sonal, आप करना चाहेंगे? Would you like to close? I mean, I can do it, but if you'd like to do it, you're welcome. Okay, I'm going to do जो हमारा sharing of merits है. That's what we do. और काफी अच्छा अवसर भी है. हमने ये जो आज कई घंटे साथ बिताए हैं, इससे जो भी पुण्य अर्जित हुआ हो वो हम डेडिकेट करें to everybody else who's less fortunate than we are, and may others also have the good fortune to.
I clicked something, मैं unmute कर नहीं पाई, आप कीजिएगा.
Okay, so you're welcome to do the closing chanting if you'd like.
जी. Parita or I mean.
You have about maybe 10 minutes, so you can choose whatever you want to do.
Okay. जी. Karaniya Metta, shall I go ahead? जी. Karaniya Metta Sutta. Karaniyamata kusalena yantam santam padam abhisamecha sako ujucha subhujucha सुवचोच मुदु अनतिमानि सन्तुस्सकोच सुभरोच अपकिच्चोच सल्लहुकबुद्धि सन्तीन्द्रियोच निपकोच अपगब्बो कुलेषु अननुगिद्धो न च खुद्दं समाचरे किञ्चि येन विन्युपरे उपवदेयुं सुखिनो वा खेमिनो होन्तु सबे सत्ता भवन्तु सुखितत्ता ये केचिपाणभूतत्ति तसा वा थावरा वा अनवशेषा दीघा वा ये महन्ता वा मध्यमा रसका अणुकथूला दिट्ठा वा ये च अदिट्ठा ये च दूरे वसन्ति अविदूरे भूता वा सम्भवेसि वा सबे सत्ता भवन्तु सुखितत्ता न परो परं निकुब्बेथ नातिमन्येथ कथञ्चिनं किञ्चि व्यारोसनापटिगसंज्ञा नान्यमन्यस्य दुःखमिच्छेय माता यथा नियं पुत्रं आयुषा एकपुत्रमनुरक्षे एवंपि सर्वभूतेषु मानसं भावये अपरिमाणं मेत्तं च सर्वलोकस्मिन् मानसं भावये अपरिमाणम् उद्धं अधो च तिर्यं च असम्बाधं अवैरं असपत्तं तिष्ठं चिरं निसिन्नो वा शयानो वा यावतस्य विगतमिद्धो एतं सतिं अधिष्ठेय ब्रह्ममेतं विहारं इदमाहु दिट्ठं च अनुपगम्यशीलवादस्सनेन सम्पन्नो कामेषु विनेयगेद्धं न हि जातु गभ्यसेयं पुनरेतीति। ऐसा करना चाहिए उसे जो अच्छाई में कुशल है और शांति का मार्ग भली प्रकार जानता है। वह सुयोग्य बने, सरल बने, सुभाषी बने, मृदु स्वभाव वाला और निरभिमानी बने। वह सदा संतुष्ट रहे, उसका पोषण सहज हो, अति व्यस्त ना हो, सादगी का जीवन हो, इंद्रियां शांत हो, दक्ष हो, विनीत हो, कुलों में आसक्त ना हो, कुछ भी ऐसा न करे जिसे विज्ञ जन बुरा कहें। सदैव यही भाव रहे, सुखी और क्षेम युक्त सभी प्राणी अंतर मन में सुखी हो। जो भी प्राणी है, स्थावर या जांगम, बिना किसी अपवाद के, बड़ी या महान अथवा मध्यम या छोटी, सूक्ष्म अथवा स्थूल देहधारी, दृश्य हो या अदृश्य, दूर रहते हो या पास, उत्पन्न हो या उत्पन्न होने वाले हो, सभी प्राणी अंतर मन में सुखी हो। एक दूसरे को धोखा न दे, न किसी से घृणा करे, क्रोध या वैमनस्य से एक दूसरे के दुख की कामना न करे। जैसे एक माता अपने जीवन की परवाह किए बगैर अपने इकलौते पुत्र की रक्षा करती है, उसी प्रकार वह सभी प्राणियों के प्रति अपने मन में अपरिमित मैत्री भाव बढ़ाए। सभी लोगों के प्रति अपरिमित मैत्री भावना करे। ऊपर नीचे, आड़े तिरछे, बिना किसी बाधा के, बिना वैर और शत्रुता के, चाहे खड़ा हो या चलता, बैठा या लेटा, जब तक तंद्रा विहीन है, इस स्मृति को बनाए रखे, इसे ही ब्रह्म विहार कहते हैं। इस प्रकार वह किसी मिथ्या दृष्टि में नहीं पड़ता, शील व सम्यक दृष्टि से संपन्न हो जाता है। कामनाओं के प्रति आसक्ति को हटाकर पुनः गर्भ में नहीं आता। थैंक यू बंते जी, ओवर टू यू।
Okay, so we can still do some sharing of merits. Maybe Dharsa, before I do the chant, if you'd like to, because there are many of us, और शायद हम लोग इस concept से परिचित ना हो, may I request you to briefly just introduce us to the concept of sharing merits, Dharsa, please. I think Dharsa's speaker is off.
सर आप म्यूट पे ही हैं।
No, his speaker is not working, Deepti. We'll have to type it out. उनके speaker बंद हो जाता है ना? He has got a particular one that goes off.
I'm just looking, opening it up so that I can bring it in context. तो ये है हमारा जो पुण्य समर्पण एवं शुभ संकल्प की कथाएं। इसका तात्पर्य ये है बेसिकली कि जो भी हम पुण्य करते हैं उसको समर्पण कर देते हैं, उससे कि हमारे पुण्य से सभी प्राणियों का लाभ हो। क्योंकि साधना करने के जो उद्देश्य होता है, बेसिकली उद्देश्य तो यही है कि मैं दुख से मुक्त हूँ, बेसिक तो उद्देश्य यही रहता है। बट वी ऑल्सो अंडरस्टैंड दैट दिस कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ जब तक हमें मैं का भाव बना रहेगा तो सचमुच में दुख से मुक्ति नहीं होने वाली है। तो एक कुशल उपाय है उसके लिए कि हम, और खासतौर पे जब पुण्य करते हैं तो बहुत संभावना रहती है कि उसको पर्सनली लें एंड देन वी अराउज प्राइड एंड वी गेट इनटू, इनफैक्ट वो जो अभिधम में कई बार हमने चैंट किया, कुशलो धम्मो अकुशलस्य धम्मस्य हेतुपच्चे उपनिश्चय पच्चे न पच्चे, वो बात हो जाती है कि, और वो भगवान उसमें क्लियरली कहते हैं दानम दित्वा उपोषधम करता, तो उपोषध भी करता है, दान भी देता है, शील का पालन करता है, और फिर उस पर गर्व करता, उस पर अपना गर्व करता है कि मैं इतना अच्छा, बाकी इतने अच्छे नहीं, मैं पुण्य करने वाला, दूसरे पुण्य करने वाले नहीं। एंड देन देयर इज ए डीपर अंडरस्टैंडिंग दैट अगर मैं कुछ कर भी पाया हूँ अच्छा काम, इस करने में न जाने कितने लोगों ने मेरी सहायता की है, तभी ये संभव हुआ। मेरे कार्मिक एंसेस्टर्स के कारण ये संभव हुआ कि मैं कुछ आज कर पा रहा हूँ, मेरी परिस्थितियां ऐसी हैं कि मैं कर पा रहा हूँ, और बहुत लोग हैं वो चाहते हुए भी नहीं कर पा रहे हैं। सो दैट अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ द नेचर ऑफ बीइंग, दैट देयर इज नो इंडिविजुअल पर्सनल बीइंग हियर, अनात्म बोध की जो बात है उसको प्रैक्टिकली करने के लिए एक तरीका है कि हाँ, हम अपने पुण्यों को समर्पित करते हैं उनके लिए जो कि जिनके कारण ये संभव हो पाया। उसमें हमारे टीचर्स हैं, माता पिता हैं, संबंधी हैं, फोर्सेस हैं, यू नो, विंड, वाटर, उसके बगैर तो शायद कुछ भी ना हो पाए। सो वी कैन सी किस तरह की काइंड ऑफ शेयर आवर मेरिट्स विद इट, और वी डेडिकेट आवर मेरिट्स टू देम, एंड स्लोली फ्रॉम दीज पीपल जिनसे हमारा डायरेक्ट ग्रेटिट्यूड है, वी मूव टुवर्ड्स जनरल पीपल, जो इंक्लूडिंग दोज जो बेशक हम न्यूट्रल हैं, जिनको नहीं जानते, और इवन जिनके प्रति वैर है, वी शेयर इट विद देम सो दैट द फीलिंग ऑफ एनिमोसिटी फॉल्स डाउन। एंड देन आप कहेंगे कि सब आप उनके लिए करेंगे तो मैं अपने लिए कुछ नहीं करूंगा क्या? सो दैट्स देन वी से दैट वी मे दिस नोबल डीड्स जो मैंने किए हैं, और इसको जो मैं डेडिकेट कर रहा हूँ, इस डेडिकेशन के कारण मेरा क्या लाभ हो, तृष्णा एवं आसक्ति का शीघ्र भेजन सुलभ हो, मुझे निर्वाण का साक्षात्कार हो। दीज आर द काइंड ऑफ रिकमेंडेड प्रैक्टिसेस बड़ी ब्यूटीफुल चैंट्स हैं वो, इदं में पुण्यम निब्बानस्य पच्चयो होतु, जो मैंने पुण्य किया ये निर्वाण का कारण बने, ना कि कुछ अगले जन्म में मुझे कुछ ये उपलब्ध हो जाए या मटेरियल कुछ एक्सपेक्टेशन करें। दूसरा कहा जाता है इदम में पुण्यम आसव क्षय वहन होतु, जो पुण्य किए हैं वो मेरे आसवों को क्षय करने में मदद करे। So these are the kind of things which Buddha praised, that yes, this kind of aspiration is good, rather than keeping aspiration कि मैंने पुण्य किया तो मेरे को मटेरियल कुछ लाभ हो जाए, ये प्राप्त हो जाए, ऐसा प्राप्त हो जाए। तो इट्स अ वेरी काइंड ऑफ मेरी समझ में बड़ा कुशल उपाय है अपना अहम कम करने का, कृतज्ञता ज्ञापन करने का, और अपने साधना में जो पुण्यानुसति है उसका अभ्यास करने का, क्योंकि पुण्यानुसति भी एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण तरीका है चित्त को प्रसन्न करने का, और ताकि हमारे साधना में मदद मिल सके। एंड एट द एंड वी आर डेडिकेटिंग एवरीथिंग टू द बुद्धा धम्मा एंड संघा, एंड उसके प्रभाव से भी हम कहते हैं मारो का संग लवंतु मा, कोई नेगेटिविटी जो है मेरे को ओवरवेलम न कर पाए। सो द होल एफर्ट इज टुवर्ड्स द प्रोग्रेस इन धम्मा। सो with that understanding, we can see that it's a very beautiful way of practicing, and then concluding our practice in a very beautiful manner.
Thank you, thank you. So इस भाव को जो धर साहब ने डिस्क्राइब किया, इसको मन में रखते हुए अन्नमयं उद्दिश्येन दिट्ठान गाथायो भ्रामसे ईमिना पुण्यकामेना उपज्जय गुणोत्तरा आचार्योपकारा च माता पिता च ज्ञातका, मेरे इन पुण्यों से मेरे गुणवान उपाध्याय, मेरे उपकारी आचार्य माता पिता एवं संबंधी, सूर्यो चंद्रमा राजा गुणवंता नरापि च, ब्रह्ममारा च इंद्रा च लोकपाला च देवता, सूर्य चंद्रमा राजा तथा गुणवान नर, ब्रह्म मार इंद्र यम तथा लोकपाल देवता, यमो मित्ता मनुस्सा च मज्झता वेदिकापि च, साबे सात्ता सुखी होन्तु पुण्यानि पकतानि मे, सभी मनुष्य चाहे मित्र हों तथस्थ अथवा वैरी हों, मेरे किए गए पुण्यों से सभी प्राणी सुखी हों। सुखं च त्रिविधं दिन्तु क्षिप्तं पापेथ वो मतं, इमेना पुण्यकामेना इमेना उद्देश्येन च, वे इन्हें त्रिविध सुख दें और वे शीघ्र अमृत पद को प्राप्त करें। इन पुण्य कर्मों से एवं इस समर्पण से क्षिप्पाहं सुलभे चैव तन्हापादान चेतनं, ये संताने हीना धम्मा याव निब्बान तो ममं, न सन्तु सब्बदा येव यथथ जातो भवे भवे, तृष्णा एवं आसक्ति का शीघ्र भेदन सुलभ हो। जब तक मुझे निर्वाण का साक्षात्कार हो, जहाँ कहीं भी जन्म हो, मन की अहितकर वृत्तियों का सर्वदा नाश हो। युज्यु चित्तं सति पन्या सल्लेखो विरियन्हिना, मारा लभन्तु नौका संकत्युञ्च विरियेषु मे, मेरा सीधा चित्त सती प्रज्ञा तप एवं पुरुषार्थ से युक्त हो, मार को मेरा पुरुषार्थ कमजोर करने का कोई अवसर ना मिले। बुद्धाधिपवरो नाथो धम्मो नाथो वरुत्तमो नाथो पच्चेक बुद्धो च संघो नाथोत्तरो ममं तेसोत्तमानुभावेन मारोको संलभन्तु मा। बुद्ध मेरे उत्तम नाथ हैं, धम्म मेरा श्रेष्ठ उत्तम नाथ है, प्रत्येक बुद्ध मेरे नाथ हैं तथा संग मेरा श्रेष्ठ नाथ है। इन सब के उत्तम प्रभाव से मार की शक्तियों को कोई अवसर ना मिले। भवतु सब मंगलं रक्षन्तु सब देवता सब बुद्धानुभावेन सदा सुखी भवन्तु ते। भवतु सब मंगलं रक्षन्तु सब देवता सब धम्मानुभावेन सदा सुखी भवन्तु ते। भवतु सब मंगलं रक्षन्तु सब देवता सब संघानुभावेन सदा सुखी भवन्तु ते। अरहं सम्मा सम्बुद्धो भगवा बुद्धं भगवन्तं अभिवादे। साक्षातो भगवता धम्मं नमस्सामि। उपटिपन्नो भगवतो सावक संघो संघं नमामि।
Let's pay respects to Bhante ji also. Naman. 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 Thank you, Bhante ji. Thank you, sir. Sonal ji, dhanyawad.
धन्यवाद।
Namaskar. Thank you, Deepthi and Sonal and Bhante ji and all of you.
Thank you everyone.